Some confrontations change everything. At 3 in the morning, in a hospital parking lot shrouded in fog, an exhausted nurse, freshly fired for daring to speak the truth, found her car blocked by a stranger's arrogance. In that moment of raw desperation, grief, and fury, she unleashed years of pain on a man she thought was just another selfish soul who didn't understand what it means to fight for lives. She screamed about injustice, about patients abandoned by broken systems, about the price of caring too much in a world that rewards silence. But as the stranger's window rolled down and the light caught his face, her world shattered. She had just confronted the one person who now held her future in his hands, the hospital's new director. What she didn't know was that her words would awaken ghosts he'd spent years burying. What he didn't know was that their paths had crossed before, in the most devastating way imaginable, on the night his wife died in a hospital where this same nurse tried desperately to save her. Now, as a beloved patient's life hangs by a thread and dark secrets surface from sealed files, two broken people must confront a truth that will either destroy them both or force an entire system to face its sins. Because sometimes, the person screaming in a parking lot isn't losing their mind. They're the only one brave enough to tell the truth everyone else is too afraid to hear. If you want to discover how a single moment of confrontation unraveled years of cover-ups and changed lives forever, stay with us until the very end. Don't forget to follow the channel, leave a like, and comment where you're watching from. Your support means everything. The cold cuts through Willow Ridge like a blade at 2:47 a.m., the kind of cold that makes your bones ache and your breath hang in the air like ghosts of words you'll never say. The community hospital's fluorescent lights flicker against the darkness, casting long shadows across the nearly empty parking lot where Lydia Monroe stands frozen, staring at her Honda Civic trapped behind a gleaming black SUV parked sideways across two spots like some kind of monument to arrogance. Her hands are shaking, but not from the cold. They're shaking because 20 minutes ago, she watched Mr. Harold Hargrove, the 78-year-old veteran who always called her kiddo, and told her stories about his late wife while she changed his four, reach for her hand with tears in his cloudy eyes as security escorted her out. They're shaking because the hospital ID badge that had hung around her neck for 6 years now sits heavy in her coat pocket, deactivated, useless, a plastic reminder that sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything. Lydia had reported the medication errors. She had documented the understaffing. She had begged the previous director to listen, to care, to see that patients were suffering. And for her trouble, she got a termination letter citing insubordination and failure to follow chain of command. The words still burn in her mind like acid. She takes a step toward the SUV, then another, her worn sneakers crunching against the gravel and scattered rock salt. Through the tinted windows, she can see the outline of someone sitting in the driver's seat, phone screen illuminating their face in cold blue light. They're just sitting there, not moving, not caring that they've blocked her in, not caring that she needs to get home to her daughter Emma, who's probably still awake despite it being a school night, worrying about why mommy's late again. Something inside Lydia fractures. Maybe it's the exhaustion from pulling double shifts for 3 months straight. Maybe it's the humiliation of being walked out past colleagues who wouldn't meet her eyes. Maybe it's the memory of Mr. Hargrove's voice cracking as he asked if he'd ever see her again, and her not being able to promise him anything. Maybe it's all of it, compressed into this single moment where a stranger's selfishness becomes the last straw on a back that's been breaking for years. Her palm hits the driver's window hard enough to sting. Once, twice, 3 times. The window descends with an expensive electric hum, revealing a man who looks like he's never had to fight for anything in his life. Mid-40s, sharp jawline, eyes the color of slate that don't even flinch at her aggression. He's wearing a charcoal suit that probably costs more than her monthly rent, and he's looking at her with the kind of detached curiosity you might give to an interesting insect. Yes. His voice is smooth, controlled, maddeningly calm. And that's when Lydia explodes. Yes. Yes. The words rip out of her throat raw and jagged. You park like this as your own personal kingdom, and all you have to say is yes? Do you have any idea? Her voice cracks and she hates herself for it, hates that she's giving this stranger her tears, but she can't stop them now. Do you have any idea what kind of night I've had? What kind of 6 years I've had? I just lost my job trying to save people's lives, and now I can't even get to my car because someone like you thinks the rules don't apply to them. The man's expression doesn't change. He just watches her with those cold, analytical eyes, and somehow that makes it worse. Lydia can feel herself unraveling, All the professionalism she's maintained through every impossible shift, every death, every family she's had to comfort, just disintegrating. People like you, she continues, her voice dropping to something more dangerous. You walk through life thinking everything exists for your convenience. You probably drive past this hospital every day and never think about what happens inside. Never think about the Mr. Hargroves who are scared and alone. Never think about the nurses who skip meals and bathroom breaks trying to keep them alive. Never think about the families sitting in waiting rooms praying for good news. We're all just obstacles to you. Just inconveniences blocking your perfect path. She's crying openly now, tears hot against her frozen cheeks. I had to leave a patient tonight. A good man who treats me like family. And I don't know if I'll ever see him again, because people like you run these places like businesses instead of sanctuaries. Because people like you care more about parking spots than human lives. The man shifts in his seat, and Lydia sees something flicker across his face. Is it annoyance? Anger? She can't tell, and she doesn't care anymore. If you're finished, he says quietly, his voice carrying an edge now, I'd like your name. The words hit her like cold water. For a second, Lydia's anger wavers, replaced by a spike of fear. Is he going to report her? Call the police? She just screamed at a stranger in a hospital parking lot at 3 in the morning. That's not exactly normal behavior. But then she thinks about Emma waiting at home. About Mr. Hargrove lying in that bed. About every patient she's ever lost because someone in an expensive suit decided that profit margins mattered more than protocols. And the fear transforms back into defiance. Lydia Monroe, she says, lifting her chin. Lydia Monroe. MONROE. Write it down. Report it. Add it to whatever list I'm already on. The man reaches into his jacket, and for a bizarre moment Lydia thinks he might actually be writing it down, but instead he pulls out his own phone. His thumb moves across the screen, typing something, and the glow illuminates his face more clearly. That's when recognition hits her like a physical blow. She knows this face. She saw it this afternoon on the memo board in the break room. The announcement that had everyone whispering, wondering what changes the new leadership would bring. The official photograph of the man who would be taking over as the hospital's director of medicine, effective immediately. Dr. Elias Warren. The man who now controls every decision, every policy, every employment file in Willow Ridge Community Hospital. The man who could make her unemployable across the entire county with a single phone call. The man who just heard her call him selfish, heartless, and everything wrong with healthcare. Lydia's mouth goes dry. Her hands, which had been clenched into fists, slowly open and hang useless at her sides. The adrenaline that had been fueling her rage drains away, leaving only the terrible clarity of what she's just done. Elias Warren looks up from his phone. His expression is unreadable, but his eyes, those cold slate eyes, seem to see straight through her, cataloging every word she said, every accusation she threw, every tear that streaked her face. Thank you, Ms. Monroe, he says, his voice carrying no inflection, no hint of what he's thinking. I'll remember this conversation. He presses a button, and the SUV's engine purrs to life. The window begins to rise, sealing him back into his expensive fortress. Lydia stands paralyzed as the vehicle pulls forward, clearing the space where her Civic sits looking suddenly small and insignificant. But before he drives away, Elias Warren does something that will haunt her for days to come. He stops the SUV beside her, the window lowering just a few inches, and says 4 words that carry the weight of prophecy. Welcome to my hospital. Then he's gone, taillights disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness, leaving Lydia standing alone in the parking lot with the taste of ashes in her mouth and the terrible knowledge that she just burned a bridge she didn't even know existed. Above her, the hospital lights continue their steady flicker. Inside, Mr. Hargrove sleeps fitfully, unaware that the nurse who loves him like a daughter just sealed whatever fate awaits them both. And somewhere in that building, in files Lydia has never seen, her name appears on documents that connect her to Elias Warren in ways neither of them yet understands. Documents that will transform this parking lot confrontation from a moment of explosive emotion into the first domino in a chain of revelations that will shatter everything they think they know about justice, guilt, and the price of truth. The cold wind picks up, carrying with it the faint smell of antiseptic and something else. Something that feels like destiny wearing the mask of coincidence. Lydia gets in her car, hands still trembling on the steering wheel, and drives home through streets that suddenly feel unfamiliar, like the geography of her entire life just shifted 3 degrees to the left. She doesn't know that in his own vehicle, Elias Warren is gripping his steering wheel with white knuckles, her face burned into his memory, her words echoing accusations he's been running from for 3 years. Neither of them sleeps that night. Neither of them knows that the next time they meet, everything will be different. Neither of them suspects that the truth waiting in the shadows will demand more from both of them than either ever imagined possible. But the universe, indifferent and precise, has already set its machinery in motion. And in Willow Ridge, where fog clings to the streets like secrets and the hospital stands as a monument to both healing and harm, nothing will ever be the same again. The morning sun breaks over Willow Ridge with the kind of pale, apologetic light that makes everything look washed out and tired. Inside the hospital's administrative wing, Elias Warren sits at his new desk, a massive oak structure that belonged to his predecessor, and stares at a manila folder he's been avoiding for the better part of an hour. His office is still mostly empty. Boxes line the walls, some open, most not. There's a coffee maker he hasn't plugged in yet, and a framed photograph of the hospital's founding board that he'll probably take down eventually. The only personal item he's unpacked is a small silver frame facing away from the door, containing a photograph he can't bear to look at most days, but refuses to pack away. The folder sits in the center of his desk like an accusation. It's worn at the edges, stuffed with papers that have been handled too many times, marked with sticky notes and handwriting that isn't his. On the tab, written in faded blue ink, Incident Report, Memorial Grace Hospital, August 2021. Elias has read this file so many times he could recite passages from memory. But last night, after the parking lot confrontation, he opened it again and saw something he'd somehow missed in 3 years of obsessive review. On page 47, buried in a list of staff members who were on duty the night his wife died, there's a name circled in pencil with a question mark beside it. Lydia Monroe, RN. And next to her name, in smaller print, a notation. Filed formal complaint regarding protocol violations. Complaint dismissed by administration. His hand hovers over the folder, fingers trembling slightly. He presses them flat against the desk to steady them, a habit he developed after the funeral, when everything about his body felt like it belonged to someone else. The trembling stops, but the question remains, burning behind his eyes with an intensity that makes his temples ache. Was she there? Did she see what happened? Did she try to stop it? The intercom on his desk buzzes, making him flinch. His assistant's voice crackles through. Dr. Warren, the department heads are here for the morning briefing. Elias takes a breath, closes the folder, and slides it into his desk's bottom drawer. He locks it with a small brass key that he keeps on his person at all times, then stands and straightens his tie in the mirror hanging behind the door. The face that looks back at him is composed, professional, unreadable. Good. That's the face he needs today. The conference room is exactly what he expected. Too bright, too cold, filled with people who are sizing him up like prey animals, deciding if the new predator is worth fleeing from. Dr. Sarah Chun, chief of surgery, sits at the far end with her arms crossed. Tom Peterson, the head of nursing, keeps checking his watch. Margaret Voss, director of human resources, has that tight smile people wear when they're preparing to defend territory. Good morning, Elias says, taking his seat at the head of the table. Let's begin with patient care metrics from the past quarter. The meeting proceeds with excruciating normalcy. Numbers are presented. Concerns are raised about budget cuts and staffing shortages. Someone mentions the need for new equipment in the cardiac unit. Elias takes notes, asks precise questions, reveals nothing of the storm churning beneath his carefully maintained surface. Then Margaret Voss clears her throat in that particular way that signals she's about to bring up something unpleasant. Dr. Warren, I need to make you aware of an incident that occurred last night in the parking lot. Security footage shows a former employee engaging in what could be considered harassment of, she pauses, choosing her words carefully, of you specifically. The room goes quiet. Every eye turns to Elias. I'm aware, he says simply. Would you like us to pursue a restraining order? Given that she was recently terminated, her return to hospital property could be seen as. No. The word comes out harder than he intended. Margaret blinks, thrown off her rhythm. No restraining order, Elias continues, modulating his tone. The employee, Ms. Monroe, correct, was clearly under emotional duress. I don't consider it harassment. With all due respect, Margaret says, and Elias knows that phrase never precedes actual respect. Lydia Monroe was terminated for valid reasons. She repeatedly violated chain of command, filed multiple complaints that were investigated and found to be without merit, and created a hostile work environment by accusing senior staff of negligence. Something cold slides down Elias's spine. Found to be without merit by whom? By administration. The investigation was thorough. I'd like to see those investigation files. Margaret's smile tightens further. Of course. I'll have them sent to your office. Tom Peterson shifts in his seat, uncomfortable. Look, Dr. Warren, I worked with Lydia for years. She's passionate, maybe too passionate, but she wasn't wrong about everything. We do have staffing problems. We do have nurses covering too many patients. And when she left, we lost one of our best. That's a matter of opinion, Dr. Chin interjects. Passion without professionalism is just chaos. She saved 3 lives during the power outage last March, Tom continues, his voice gaining strength. While everyone else was panicking, she manually ventilated 2 patients for 40 minutes straight and still managed to coordinate the emergency transfer protocols. That's not chaos. That's excellence under pressure. The room divides before Elias's eyes. He can see it in their postures, their expressions. There are people who wanted Lydia gone and people who mourned her loss. And somewhere in that divide lies information he desperately needs. The matter is closed, Elias says, his voice carrying a finality that ends the discussion. Ms. Monroe will not be cited for the parking lot incident. Now, let's move on to the readmission rates for cardiac patients. The meeting continues, but Elias only half listens. His mind is turning over the pieces of a puzzle he didn't know existed 12 hours ago. Lydia Monroe filed complaints that were dismissed. His wife died in a hospital where complaints were dismissed. Lydia was terminated for being too passionate about patient safety. His wife died because someone wasn't passionate enough. When the meeting finally ends, Elias returns to his office and locks the door. He retrieves the folder from his drawer and opens it to page 47. His finger traces the line with Lydia's name, then flips forward to the actual complaint she filed. It's dated August 12, 2021, 3 days before his wife was admitted to Memorial Grace. The complaint details systematic failure to follow medication cross-checking protocols and inadequate nursing ratios, creating dangerous gaps in patient monitoring. It names specific incidents, specific dates, specific near misses that were caught by vigilant staff before becoming tragedies. The response, stamped by administration, is a single paragraph. Complaint investigated and determined to be based on misunderstanding of existing protocols. No action required. Employee counseled on proper channels for concerns. His wife died on August 19, 2021, from a medication error that occurred during a gap in monitoring. Elias closes his eyes. The office suddenly feels too small, too airless. He loosens his tie and walks to the window, looking out over the parking lot where, just hours ago, a woman he thought was unstable screamed at him about people like him destroying lives. What if she hadn't been unstable? What if she'd been right? His phone rings. It's an internal line from the nursing station on the 4th floor, the cardiac unit. He recognizes the extension because he's memorized every department's number, preparing for this role with his usual obsessive thoroughness. Dr. Warren, he answers. Sir, this is Nurse Davis on 4 West. We have a situation with Mr. Harold Hargrove, patient in room 417. His condition has deteriorated overnight and Dr. Michaels is requesting a consult, but there's something you should know. The nurse's voice drops, becomes uncertain. His daughter is here and she's asking for Lydia Monroe. She says Lydia is the only nurse her father trusts, and she's threatening to transfer him to County General if we can't get Lydia back. Elias feels the universe clicking another piece into place. What's Mr. Hargrove's current status? Blood pressure dropping, showing signs of sepsis. Dr. Michaels thinks it's related to his foresight infection, but the patient is refusing most interventions. He keeps asking for his Lydia. I'll be right there. Elias hangs up and stands motionless for a moment, his reflection ghostly in the window glass. He thinks about the woman in the parking lot, voice raw with grief and fury, talking about patients who treat her like family. He thinks about his wife, alone in a hospital room when she coded, no family present because visiting hours were over and regulations wouldn't bend. He thinks about the complaints that were dismissed and the voices that were silenced and the comfortable lie he's been telling himself for 3 years, that her death was a tragic accident, random and unavoidable. What if it wasn't random? What if it was systematic? And what if the woman he just watched drive away in tears was the only person who tried to stop it? He grabs his white coat and heads for the elevator, his mind already working through scenarios, possibilities, strategies. But underneath the professional calculation, something else is stirring, something dangerous and painful and long buried. It feels like hope. And hope, Elias has learned, is the most terrifying emotion of all. Because hope means there might have been a way to save her. And if there was a way, then someone chose not to take it. And if someone chose not to take it, then someone is responsible. And if someone is responsible, then his careful, controlled grief transforms into something much harder to contain. The elevator doors close, carrying him toward a patient he's never met and a truth he's not sure he wants to find. Lydia's kitchen smells like burned toast and desperation. She sits at the small formica table that wobbles on one uneven leg, staring at her phone like it might suddenly offer answers to questions she's too afraid to ask out loud. Emma left for school 20 minutes ago, her daughter's worried eyes lingering on her face a moment too long before she grabbed her backpack and walked out into the cold morning. "Mom, are you okay?" Emma had asked, her voice small and uncertain in a way that broke something fundamental in Lydia's chest. "I'm fine, baby," Lydia had lied, the words tasting like copper. "Just tired." But she's not fine. She's drowning. The confrontation in the parking lot replays in her mind on an endless loop, each repetition making her cringe harder. The new director. She screamed at the new director. Called him heartless. Called him everything wrong with healthcare. And now he has her name, her full name, spelled out letter by letter like she was signing her own death warrant. Her phone buzzes, making her jump so hard she nearly knocks over her cold coffee. It's a text from Patricia Chun, one of the few nurses who still talks to her after the termination. The message is brief, just 3 words that make Lydia's blood run cold. It's Mr. Hargrove. Lydia's fingers fly across the screen. What happened? The 3 dots appear, disappear, appear again. Patricia is choosing her words carefully, which means it's bad. Finally, infection. BP dropping. He's asking for you. His daughter's here and she's losing it. Says if you're not allowed back, she's transferring him to county. Lydia stands so fast the chair scrapes across the linoleum with a sound like a scream. Her hands are shaking again, that terrible tremor that started last night and hasn't fully stopped. Mr. Hargrove. Harold. The man who told her about his late wife's apple pie recipe and how he still can't sleep on her side of the bed, even though she's been gone for 12 years. The man who held her hand when she broke down crying after losing a young patient to an overdose. The man who called her kiddo and made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she was doing something that mattered in this broken world. She texts back, "How bad?" "Bad enough that Michaels is worried. Lydia, the new guy, Warren, he's on his way up there now. I don't know what's going to happen, but thought you should know." Lydia sits back down, her legs suddenly unable to hold her weight. Elias Warren is going to see Mr. Hargrove. He's going to make decisions about Harold's care. And Harold, stubborn and loyal to a fault, is refusing treatment because the only person he trusts isn't there. This is her fault. All of it. If she hadn't reported the medication errors, she'd still have her job. If she still had her job, she'd be there for Harold's morning vitals check, would have caught the infection earlier, would have advocated for him the way she always did. Instead, she's sitting in her kitchen in sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, unemployed and helpless while a good man suffers because of her absence. Her phone rings. It's a number she doesn't recognize, local area code. Her thumb hovers over the decline button, but something makes her answer. "Ms. Monroe?" The voice is female, older, thick with tears. "This is Grace Hargrove. You took care of my father." Lydia's throat constricts. "Mrs. Hargrove, yes. I'm so sorry about... He's dying." The words are flat, factual, devastating. They're telling me it's sepsis from an infection that should have been caught days ago. They're saying he needs aggressive treatment, but he won't let them touch him. He keeps saying he wants his Lydia. He thinks you abandoned him. The sob that escapes Lydia's throat is involuntary, raw. "I didn't abandon him. I was fired. I tried." "I know what you tried," Grace interrupts, her voice gaining strength. "Dad told me everything. How you stayed late every shift to sit with him. How you fought with the charge nurse about his medication schedule. How you were the only one who listened when he said something felt wrong." She pauses, and Lydia can hear her breathing, ragged and desperate. "Please. I don't care what happened between you and the hospital. I don't care about their rules or their politics. My father is dying, and he's calling your name. Is there any way you can come?" Lydia is already moving, pulling on jeans, searching for her shoes. "I'm on my way. Tell him I'm coming. Tell him to hold on." "Thank you," Grace whispers and hangs up. The drive to the hospital takes 12 minutes that feel like 12 hours. Lydia's mind races through possibilities, each one worse than the last. She was officially terminated. Security has probably been notified. If she shows up, they could have her arrested for trespassing. But if she doesn't show up, Harold might give up. Might let go because he thinks she doesn't care. The parking lot is more crowded in daylight, and for a moment, Lydia can't breathe as she remembers standing here at 3 a.m., her fist pounding against that window, her voice breaking as she screamed at a stranger who turned out to be the one person who could destroy what's left of her life. She parks in the visitors section and sits with her hands on the steering wheel, trying to steady her breathing. Through the windshield, she can see the hospital's main entrance, the revolving doors that have swallowed so many of her years, so much of her heart. Inside those walls is Harold, scared and sick. Inside those walls is Elias Warren, the man she needs to face. Her phone buzzes. Patricia, Warren just went into Harold's room. Grace is with him. Whatever you're going to do it fast. Lydia gets out of the car and walks toward the entrance with her head down, hoping the morning shift receptionist won't recognize her. But as she pushes through the revolving door into the familiar antiseptic smell of the lobby, she sees Margaret Voss from HR standing near the elevators, talking to a security guard. Their eyes meet. Margaret's expression shifts from surprise to something harder, more calculating. She says something to the guard, who immediately starts walking toward Lydia. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me," the guard says. His name tag reads Rodriguez, and Lydia recognizes him. He's always been kind, has a daughter about Emma's age. His face is apologetic but firm. "Please," Lydia says, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just need 5 minutes. There's a patient." "Ms. Monroe, you're no longer employed here," Margaret Voss says, clicking across the lobby in her heels. "Your presence on hospital property constitutes trespassing. I'm within my rights to have you removed." "He's dying." The words burst out of Lydia, loud enough to turn heads in the waiting area. "Harold Hargrove is dying, and he's asking for me. 5 minutes. That's all I need." "That's not possible," Margaret says, but there's something in her expression, a flicker of discomfort, maybe even shame. "The liability alone." "Let her through." The voice cuts through the lobby like a blade. Everyone turns. Elias Warren stands at the elevator bank, still wearing his white coat, his face unreadable. He walks toward them with measured steps, each footfall echoing in the suddenly quiet space. Margaret turns to him, clearly thrown. "Dr. Warren, this employee was terminated. She has no clearance to." "I said let her through." His eyes, those cold slate eyes, fix on Lydia. She can't read what she sees there. Anger? Curiosity? Something else entirely? "Ms. Monroe, Mr. Hargrove is asking for you. His daughter has requested your presence. I'm granting temporary access for the purpose of patient care." Margaret's mouth opens and closes like a fish. This is highly irregular. So is refusing a dying man's request. Elias's voice carries an edge now, sharp enough to cut. "Ms. Monroe, you have 30 minutes. Room 417. 4th floor." He turns and walks back to the elevators without another word, leaving Lydia standing in the lobby with Margaret fuming beside her, and Rodriguez looking profoundly relieved he doesn't have to physically remove her. Lydia doesn't waste time questioning the reprieve. She runs for the stairs, the elevator would take too long, and climbs 4 floors with her heart hammering against her ribs. By the time she reaches the cardiac unit, she's breathless, but it doesn't matter. Nothing matters except getting to Harold. Room 417's door is partially open. Through it, she can hear the steady beep of monitors, the hiss of oxygen, and Grace's voice, soft and pleading. "Dad, please. You need to let them help you." Lydia pushes the door open. The sight that greets her nearly brings her to her knees. Harold looks so small in the hospital bed, so diminished from the man who joked with her just days ago. His skin has a grayish tint, his breathing is labored, and his eyes are closed. Grace sits beside him, holding his hand, her face streaked with tears. "Harold," Lydia says softly. His eyes flutter open. For a moment, they're unfocused, confused. Then recognition dawns, and something like relief floods his features. "Kiddo," he whispers, his voice barely audible. "You came back." Lydia crosses the room and takes his other hand. It's cold, too cold, and she has to swallow hard against the fear rising in her throat. "I'm here. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Behind her, she hears the door open again. She doesn't need to turn around to know who's standing there. She can feel Elias Warren's presence like a physical weight, watching, assessing, deciding something she doesn't yet understand. By noon, the entire town of Willow Ridge knows about the parking lot incident. Small towns are like that. Information travels faster than reason, morphing and expanding with each retelling until the truth becomes something unrecognizable, dressed in gossip's most dramatic clothing. At Ruby's Diner on Main Street, where the coffee is always too hot and the pie is always just right, Martha Henderson leans across the counter to whisper to anyone within earshot. I heard she attacked him with her car keys. Just started screaming like a lunatic right there in the hospital parking lot at 3 in the morning. That's not what I heard, counters Jim Pratt, the mailman who knows everyone's business by virtue of delivering it. My cousin works security there. Says she was crying, not screaming. Says the new director looked scared. Well, my daughter's a nurse on the 3rd floor, adds Patricia's mother, Eleanor, stirring sugar into her tea with righteous indignation. And she says Lydia Monroe is a hero. Says she's the only one who ever stood up to those administrators when they were cutting corners. The conversations ripple through the town like stones thrown into a pond. At the grocery store, people whisper in the produce aisle. At the elementary school pickup line, mothers exchange meaningful glances when Emma Monroe climbs into her mother's car, the poor girl looking so tired, doesn't she? At the post office, at the hardware store, at every corner where Willow Ridge residents gather, the story grows legs and runs. Some paint Lydia as unstable, a woman who couldn't handle the pressure, who broke down and lashed out at the wrong person at the wrong time. Others see her as a martyr, sacrificed on the altar of hospital bureaucracy, finally pushed too far by a system that values money over mercy. The town divides along invisible lines, each side certain of their righteousness, neither knowing the whole truth. But nowhere is the gossip more intense than within the hospital itself. In the nurses' break room, voices rise and fall with the rhythm of shift changes. Some defend Lydia with fierce loyalty. Others, burned by their own struggles with management, stay silent and keep their heads down. A few actively campaign against her, seeing in her downfall a cautionary tale. This is what happens when you don't follow the rules, when you think you're better than the system, when you forget your place. Patricia Chin sits in the corner during her lunch break, picking at a salad she has no appetite for, listening to the competing narratives swirl around her. She wants to defend her friend, wants to tell them all about the times Lydia stayed hours past her shift to hold a dying patient's hand, about the medications she caught being administered incorrectly, about the lives she saved through sheer stubborn vigilance. But Patricia has a mortgage and 2 kids in college, and the memory of watching Lydia be escorted out by security is too fresh, too frightening. So she stays quiet, and hates herself a little more with each passing minute. Meanwhile, 3 floors up in his corner office, Elias Warren sits with his door closed and his blinds drawn, staring at a computer screen that displays security footage from August 19, 2021. It's taken him 4 hours of navigating bureaucratic red tape and calling in favors from his previous hospital to access these files. Memorial Grace Hospital didn't want to release them, said they were part of a closed investigation, that privacy concerns prevented disclosure, that surely Dr. Warren understood the delicate nature of such matters. He understood perfectly. They were hiding something. The footage is grainy, time-stamped 11:47 p.m. The hallway outside his wife's room. He watches nurses pass by, 1, 2, 3 times, none of them stopping, none of them checking. The medication alarm that should have sounded doesn't. The monitoring system that should have alerted staff to her declining vitals fails silently, invisibly. Then, at 12:03 a.m., a figure appears. Female, medium height, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She pauses outside the room, looks at a clipboard, then pushes the door open. Elias can't see what happens inside. The camera angle is wrong, but he can see her emerge 6 minutes later, moving fast, waving frantically for help. He pauses the footage, zooms in on the nurse's face. The image is pixelated, blurred by motion and poor lighting, but there's something familiar about the set of her shoulders, the way she moves with purpose even in crisis. His phone rings. It's an internal line he doesn't recognize. Dr. Warren, this is Dr. Chun from surgery. I thought you should know. There's been some concerning talk circulating among staff about the Monroe situation. Some are saying you showed favoritism by allowing her back into the building. Others are saying she manipulated you. I wanted to give you a heads up that this could become a problem. Elias rubs his eyes, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on his shoulders like physical force. Thank you for the warning, Dr. Chin. I'll address it at tomorrow's staff meeting. There's something else, Sarah Chin continues, her voice dropping. I worked with Lydia for 3 years. She's intense, yes. Sometimes abrasive. But she's never been wrong about a patient. Not once. When she raises a concern, it's because something is genuinely wrong. I just thought you should know that. The line goes dead before Elias can respond. He sits back in his chair, pieces of a puzzle he doesn't want to solve arranging themselves before him with terrible clarity. Lydia Monroe filed complaints at Memorial Grace. She was dismissed as a troublemaker. His wife died. Lydia Monroe filed complaints at Willow Ridge. She was terminated. Harold Hargrove nearly died. What if the pattern isn't coincidence? What if everywhere Lydia goes, she sees problems that everyone else is too comfortable or too corrupt to acknowledge? What if she's not the problem? She's the canary in the coal mine, and everyone keeps shooting the canary instead of checking for gas. His hand moves to his desk drawer, pulls out his personal phone, opens a contact he hasn't called in 2 years. Dr. Michael Reeves, his wife's oncologist at Memorial Grace, the man who held Elias while he sobbed in a hospital chapel at 3 a.m. The phone rings 4 times before Michael answers. Elias? Is everything okay? I need to ask you something about Claire's case, Elias says, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. And I need you to be completely honest with me. There's a long pause. Okay. Was there a nurse who tried to raise concerns the night Claire died? Someone who filed complaints about protocol violations? Another pause, longer this time. Why are you asking about this now? Because I think I just met her, and I need to know if I'm losing my mind or if there's something real here. Michael sighs, a sound that carries 3 years of guilt and exhaustion. There was a nurse. I didn't know her name, different department. But there were rumors after what happened. People said someone had tried to warn administration about the medication protocols being bypassed to save time. Said this nurse had been documenting near misses for weeks. What happened to her? I don't know. She wasn't there when I came back to work the following month. I assumed she quit, or was fired. I was too busy falling apart to ask questions. Michael's voice cracks. Elias, what's this about? I'm not sure yet, Elias says, and it's not entirely a lie. He has theories, suspicions, a growing certainty that makes his chest ache with something he's afraid to name. But he doesn't have proof. Not yet. Be careful, Michael warns. If you start pulling at threads in Memorial Grace's incident reports, they'll pull back. Hard. There are lawyers involved, settlement agreements, NDAs. It's not a clean wound you're about to reopen. I know. Elias hangs up and sits in the gathering darkness of his office, the computer screen casting his face in blue light. Downstairs, in the hospital cafeteria, Lydia sits with Grace Hargrove over coffee neither of them is drinking. Harold is stable for now. The antibiotics are working, his vitals are improving, and Lydia's presence seemed to flip some switch in him that made him finally accept treatment. But the 30 minutes Elias Warren granted her have long since expired, and she's still here, technically trespassing, waiting for security to escort her out. Why did they fire you? Grace asks, her voice quiet but insistent. Dad said you were fighting for him. For all the patients. What happened? Lydia stares into her coffee cup, seeing her reflection fragmented in the dark liquid. I saw things that weren't right. Corners being cut. Protocols being ignored. And I couldn't stay quiet about it. So they punished you for caring? They punished me for being inconvenient. Lydia looks up, meets Grace's eyes. Your father is alive because someone finally listened. But it shouldn't have taken his daughter threatening to transfer him. It shouldn't have taken the new director giving me special permission. The system is broken, Grace. And I don't know how to fix it. Grace reaches across the table, covers Lydia's hand with her own. Maybe you don't fix it. Maybe you just keep being the person who stands in the gap, even when it costs you everything. The words hit Lydia like a physical blow, not because they're new, but because they're exactly what she needed to hear from someone who understands the weight of that calling. Above them, in his darkened office, Elias Warren makes a decision that will change everything. He opens his email and types a message to the hospital's legal department. Request all personnel files and incident reports related to Lydia Monroe, RN, including any complaints she filed and the investigations thereof. Effective immediately. Then he opens a second email, this one to Memorial Grace Hospital's administration. Formal request for complete records regarding nursing staff member Lydia Monroe, including any disciplinary actions, complaints filed, and involvement in incident dated August 19, 2021. Please provide within 48 hours, or I will pursue legal channels. He hits send on both before he can second-guess himself, and somewhere in the machinery of bureaucracy, alarms begin to sound. Because Elias Warren isn't just any doctor asking questions. He's a hospital director with resources and standing, and more dangerous than both of those things, he's a widower who just realized his wife's death might not have been inevitable. The files arrive at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night, 47 hours after Elias submitted his requests. He's still in his office, has been here since 6 a.m., surviving on black coffee, and the kind of obsessive focus that used to worry his wife when she was alive. "You're going to burn out," Claire would say, standing in the doorway of his home office with her arms crossed, trying to look stern but failing because her eyes were too kind. "The world won't end if you sleep, Eli." But she was wrong about that. The world did end. Just not the way either of them expected. The email notification pings on his computer with an almost apologetic sound. The subject line reads, Records Request Confidential. 2 attachments, both PDF files. The first is labeled Personnel File, L. Monroe, Willow Ridge Community Hospital. The second makes his hand pause over the mouse. Personnel File, L. Monroe, Memorial Grace Hospital, sealed. Sealed. The word carries weight, implication, the scent of cover-up. Elias clicks on the Willow Ridge file first, needs to build up to the other one. The document opens to reveal standard employment records, hire date, performance reviews, certifications, training completions. Lydia Monroe was hired 6 years ago with impeccable references from Memorial Grace Hospital. Her performance reviews for the first 4 years are exemplary. Exceeds expectations, appears so many times it becomes almost meaningless. Supervisors praise her clinical skills, her rapport with patients, her willingness to go above and beyond. Then 2 years ago something shifts. The tone of the reviews changes subtly. Shows initiative, but needs to improve communication with management. 6 months later, excellent patient care but struggles with chain of command protocols. A year after that, clinical skills remain strong, however, employee has been counseled multiple times about appropriate channels for concerns. Elias recognizes the language. It's the bureaucratic equivalent of building a paper trail, laying groundwork for eventual termination. He's seen it before, used it himself when dealing with truly problematic staff. But something about these particular phrases makes his skin crawl. He scrolls down to the complaints section. There are 7 formal complaints filed by Lydia over 18 months, each meticulously documented with dates, times, specific incidents, and patient identifiers removed for privacy. He reads them with growing unease. Complaint 1. Medication administration protocols being bypassed during night shifts, creating risk of dosing errors. Specific examples provided. Investigation outcome. No evidence of systematic problems. Staff counseled on proper documentation. Complaint 2. Nursing ratios consistently exceeding safe levels, particularly on weekends. Statistics and patient outcome data included. Investigation outcome. Staffing levels reviewed and found to be within acceptable parameters. Employee counseled on understanding resource constraints. Complaint 3. Broken equipment not being reported or repaired in timely manner, including faulty 4 pumps. List of specific equipment with serial numbers attached. Investigation outcome. Maintenance logs reviewed. No systematic issues found. Employee reminded of proper reporting procedures. The pattern continues through all 7 complaints. Each one dismissed. Each one followed by Lydia being counseled or reminded or educated about something. The final complaint, filed 3 weeks before her termination, details the exact concerns that nearly killed Harold Hargrove. Elias sits back, his coffee forgotten and cold. In his years of hospital administration, he's learned to read between the lines of official documents. What he's reading now is a textbook case of institutional retaliation disguised as performance management. Lydia wasn't fired for being bad at her job. She was fired for being too good at it, for seeing problems that management didn't want to acknowledge. His hand trembles slightly as he moves the mouse to open the second file. The Memorial Grace records. The document opens with a legal header he doesn't expect. Subject to settlement agreement and non-disclosure provisions. His pulse quickens. This isn't just a personnel file. This is evidence in a legal case. Lydia's employment at Memorial Grace lasted 3 years. Her reviews there are even more glowing than her early Willow Ridge evaluations. Then he reaches August 2021, and the file explodes with documentation. August 5, 2021, formal complaint filed by L. Monroe regarding systematic failures in medication cross-checking protocols during night shifts. The complaint is detailed, almost obsessively so, with charts showing near-miss incidents over the previous 6 months. Lydia had been tracking this herself, documenting every close call, every time a mistake was caught at the last second by vigilant staff. August 12, 2021. Follow-up complaint after initial complaint was dismissed. This one is more urgent, the language sharper. It is not a question of if a serious error will occur, but when. I am formally requesting immediate action to prevent patient harm. August 19, 2021. Incident report. Patient Claire Warren admitted to oncology unit for routine chemotherapy. Medication error during night shift leads to adverse reaction and subsequent complications. Patient expires at 1:47 a.m., August 20, 2021. Elias stops breathing. The room spins. He knows this report. He's read it 1,000 times, has memorized every clinical detail, every timeline, every cold medical term that describes how his wife's heart simply stopped beating while he was at home sleeping, believing she was safe. But there's more in this file. Things he's never seen before. August 20th, 2021. Statement from Elle Monroe. She had been the one to discover Claire's decline, had called for help, initiated emergency protocols, performed CPR until the code team arrived. Her statement is clinical, but he can read the emotion underneath it. Patient was unmonitored for approximately 43 minutes due to staffing shortage and equipment failure. By the time symptoms were discovered, patient was already in severe distress. I've been reporting these exact conditions for weeks. This death was preventable. August 25th, 2021. Hospital administration's response. Investigation concludes that unfortunate incident was result of unavoidable equipment malfunction and unexpected patient reaction. No fault found with staff or protocols. Elle Monroe placed on administrative leave pending review of her conduct during incident. September 15, 2021. Settlement agreement. Memorial Grace Hospital agrees to pay Lydia Monroe an undisclosed sum in exchange for her resignation and signature on a non-disclosure agreement, preventing her from discussing the incident or the hospital's practices with anyone, including future employers. She didn't just try to warn them. She tried to save Claire, and they paid her to disappear. Elias's hands are shaking so badly, now he has to grip the edge of his desk to steady them. The room feels too hot, too small, like the walls are pressing in. His vision blurs, and he realizes he's crying, hot, angry tears that he hasn't allowed himself to shed in 3 years because grief is weakness and weakness is intolerable. But this isn't just grief anymore. This is rage. Pure, clarifying, righteous rage. Claire didn't die from cancer complications. She died from institutional negligence that someone tried to stop. Lydia Monroe, the woman he dismissed as unstable, the woman screaming at him in a parking lot, the woman he's been investigating like a suspect, she was the only person who fought for his wife. And for her trouble, she was silenced, paid off, and forced to sign away her right to tell the truth. Then she came to Willow Ridge and tried again. Saw the same problems, filed the same complaints, got the same result. Fired, dismissed, branded as difficult. And 2 nights ago, she looked him in the eye, not knowing who he was, not knowing the connection between them, and told him exactly what kind of person destroys the little humanity left in hospitals. She was talking about people like him. And she was right. Elias stands abruptly, his chair rolling back and hitting the wall with a bang that echoes in the silent office. He paces, energy coursing through him with nowhere to go. He wants to scream, wants to drive to Memorial Grace and tear the place apart with his bare hands. Wants to find every administrator who dismissed Lydia's complaints and make them look at Claire's death certificate, make them own what their cowardice cost. But more than any of that, he needs to talk to Lydia. Needs to tell her he knows. Needs to what? Apologize? Thank her? Beg her forgiveness for being exactly the kind of blind, arrogant director who values comfort over truth? His phone rings, the shrill sound cutting through his thoughts. It's the hospital's main line, which is strange at midnight. He answers with a voice that doesn't sound like his own. Dr. Warren, this is Nurse Davis on 4 West. The nurse's voice is tight with controlled panic. Mr. Hargrove's condition has deteriorated rapidly. We need you up here now. And sir, his daughter is asking for Lydia Monroe again. Should I call her? Elias looks at the files still open on his computer screen, at the evidence of systematic failure and one woman's lonely crusade against it. He thinks about Claire dying alone because no one would listen to warnings. He thinks about Harold Hargrove calling for the only nurse he trusts while the system that failed him once prepares to fail him again. Yes, he says. Call her. And tell her. He pauses, choosing his words carefully because they matter now in a way they didn't before. Tell her I said please. He hangs up and grabs his white coat, but before he leaves, he does one more thing. He forwards both files to his personal email, then to a secure cloud storage, then prints physical copies that he locks in his briefcase. Because if Memorial Grace's lawyers come calling, if Willow Ridge's administration tries to bury this again, he wants evidence that can't be disappeared or sealed or paid into silence. The elevator ride to the 4th floor takes 37 seconds. In that time, Elias Warren transforms from the man he was into someone new. Someone who understands that sometimes the price of truth is everything you thought you knew about yourself. Lydia's phone rings at 12:43 a.m., pulling her from a sleep that wasn't really sleep, more like that liminal space between consciousness and nightmare where every sound becomes a threat and every shadow holds accusation. Emma is asleep in the next room, finally, after an hour of Lydia sitting on the edge of her daughter's bed, stroking her hair and lying about how everything was going to be okay. The caller ID shows Willow Ridge Community Hospital. Her heart stops, then hammers so hard she can feel it in her throat. Hello? Her voice comes out rough, sandpaper and fear. Ms. Monroe, this is Nurse Davis from 4 West. I'm calling about Mr. Hargrove. Davis pauses, and in that pause, Lydia hears everything she's terrified of hearing. His condition has gotten worse. Much worse. We're doing everything we can, but he's asking for you. And Dr. Warren said I should call. He said to tell you. Another pause, longer this time. He said to tell you please. Lydia is already out of bed, pulling on jeans with one hand while holding the phone with the other. How bad? His infection isn't responding to the antibiotics the way it should. His blood pressure keeps dropping despite interventions. Dr. Michaels thinks there might be complications we missed, something underlying that we're not seeing because... Davis's voice cracks slightly. Because we don't know him like you do. The words hit Lydia like absolution and condemnation wrapped together. I'm coming. 20 minutes. She hangs up and stands in her dark bedroom, hands shaking as she tries to button her jeans. Through the wall, she can hear Emma's quiet breathing, the sound that has anchored her through 6 years of single motherhood, through every impossible shift, through every moment when she wanted to quit but couldn't because someone was depending on her. She can't wake Emma. Can't drag her daughter to the hospital at 1 a.m. for what might be, what probably will be, a goodbye. She texts Patricia, emergency with Harold. Can you come sit with Emma? I know it's late. I'm desperate. The response comes within seconds. On my way. 10 minutes. Lydia sits on the edge of her bed in the darkness and allows herself exactly 30 seconds to fall apart. 30 seconds to sob into her hands, to feel the weight of every loss and every fight and every time she stood alone against systems that didn't want to change. 30 seconds to be human and broken and terrified. Then she wipes her face, pulls on a sweater, and becomes the nurse Harold needs her to be. Patricia arrives in 8 minutes, hair in a messy bun, wearing pajama pants and a thick coat. She hugs Lydia without words. There's nothing to say that hasn't already been said in the silence between them. Lydia leaves her house keys, checks on Emma one more time, and drives through empty streets toward the hospital that has become both her calling and her curse. The parking lot is nearly empty at this hour. Lydia parks in the same spot where, just days ago, she screamed at a stranger who turned out to be the one person who could either save or destroy what's left of her professional life. The memory feels like it belongs to someone else, some version of herself that still believed in clear lines between right and wrong, justice and injustice. She walks through the main entrance. No receptionist at this hour, no Margaret Voss to block her path. The elevator ride to the 4th floor stretches into eternity. When the doors finally open, she sees Elias Warren standing in the hallway outside Harold's room, still wearing his white coat, looking like he hasn't slept in days. Their eyes meet. Something passes between them that Lydia can't name, isn't ready to name. It's not quite apology, not quite understanding, but it carries weight that makes her breath catch. He's in bad shape, Elias says without preamble. His voice is different than she remembers from the parking lot. Softer. Human. The infection has spread despite aggressive antibiotic treatment. We're dealing with septic shock now. Dr. Michaels believes there's an underlying condition we've been missing. Something about his medical history that might explain why he's not responding to standard treatment. His heart, Lydia says immediately. He had rheumatic fever as a child. It left scarring on his mitral valve. It's in his chart, but people don't always. She stops, seeing Elias's expression shift. What? It's not in his current chart. Someone failed to transfer his complete medical history when he was admitted. Elias's jaw tightens. The same kind of oversight that should never happen, but does when systems are understaffed and overworked, and no one is paying attention to the details that save lives. The words hang between them, heavy with implication. Lydia wants to say, "I told you so," wants to scream that this is exactly what she's been fighting against. But Harold is dying, and there's no time for vindication or anger. "Can I see him?" Elias nods and steps aside. As Lydia moves past him, he says quietly, "I read your files. Both of them. Memorial Grace and here. I know what you tried to do. I know what it cost you." Lydia freezes, her hand on Harold's door. She turns slowly, searching Elias's face for signs of manipulation, judgment, pity. She finds none of those things. What she sees instead is raw grief, barely contained, and something that looks like shame. "My wife died at Memorial Grace," Elias continues, his voice so low she has to strain to hear it. "August 20th, 2021. You were there. You tried to save her. And they paid you to stay quiet about what really happened." The world tilts. Lydia's hand drops from the door handle. "Claire Warren," she whispers, the name surfacing from memory like a body from deep water. "The oncology patient. The medication error. That wasn't her name to you?" Elias asks, and there's no accusation in it, just a question born from need to understand. "I saw so many patients," Lydia says, but even as she speaks, the memory solidifies. A woman with kind eyes and a brave smile, fighting cancer with the kind of grace that made everyone who met her want to fight alongside her. Lydia had been doing rounds when she noticed the patient's monitor showing concerning vitals. Had rushed into the room to find Claire Warren struggling to breathe, her body reacting to medications that should never have been administered together. "I tried to save her," Lydia says, and her voice breaks on the words. "I did everything right, but by the time I found her, it was already too late. The damage was done." "I know." Elias takes a step closer. "And I know you warned them. Weeks before it happened. You documented every near miss, every protocol violation, every time the system almost killed someone. You screamed into the void, and they dismissed you. Then they paid you off and made you promise never to tell anyone what you saw. They said I'd never work as a nurse again if I didn't sign," Lydia whispers. "They said they'd make sure every hospital in the state knew I was unstable, a troublemaker, someone who couldn't be trusted. And I had Emma to think about. So I took their money and their silence, and I came here thinking maybe." Her voice cracks completely. "Maybe I could start over. Maybe I could do it right this time." "And you tried," Elias says. "You saw the same problems here, and you fought the same fight. And they did the same thing to you." Lydia nods, unable to speak past the emotion closing her throat. "I'm sorry," Elias says, and the words carry a weight that suggests he's apologizing for more than just his hospital's failures. "I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner. I'm sorry I was exactly the kind of director who values comfort over truth. I'm sorry he stops, swallows hard. "When you confronted me in the parking lot, you said people like me destroy lives. You were right. I've been so focused on protecting the institution that I forgot institutions exist to serve people, not the other way around." Before Lydia can respond, the door to Harold's room bursts open. Grace Hargrove stands there, her face streaked with tears. "Lydia, please. We're losing him. He keeps asking for you." Lydia moves without thinking, muscle memory and training overriding emotion. She enters the room, and the sight that greets her nearly brings her to her knees. Harold looks gray, his breathing labored and wet-sounding. The monitors scream their warnings, blood pressure dropping, oxygen saturation falling, heart rate becoming irregular. Dr. Michaels looks up from where he's adjusting medication drips. "I've tried everything standard protocol allows. If you have any insight, anything at all, now would be the time." Lydia moves to Harold's bedside, takes his cold hand in hers. His eyes flutter open, unfocused and afraid. "Kiddo," he whispers. "Can't breathe right." "I know, Harold. I know." Lydia turns to Michaels. Given his mitral valve scarring, the fluid is probably backing up into his lungs. The infection is putting additional strain on a heart that was already compromised. "We need to adjust our approach. Less fluid resuscitation, more focus on supporting cardiac function. And we need to consider that his valve might need surgical intervention." Michael stares at her for a moment, then nods. That makes sense. Why wasn't this in his chart? Because systems fail, Elias says from the doorway. And people like Lydia pay the price for noticing. The next 30 minutes blur into a dance of medical intervention, each adjustment made with the kind of precision that comes from truly knowing a patient. Lydia stays at Harold's side, her presence alone seeming to calm him enough that his vital signs stabilize slightly. Grace holds her father's other hand, whispering prayers Lydia pretends not to hear because hearing them would make her hope, and hope in moments like this is dangerous. Slowly, painfully slowly, Harold's oxygen levels begin to rise. His blood pressure stabilizes. The monitor's frantic beeping softens into something less urgent. It's not a miracle. It's just good medicine practiced by people who actually care. At 3:47 a.m., Harold opens his eyes fully for the first time in hours. He looks at Lydia and manages a weak smile. "You came back." "Always," Lydia whispers. "I'll always come back for you." She stays until dawn breaks over Willow Ridge, painting the hospital walls in shades of pink and gold that feel like promises. And when she finally steps into the hallway, exhausted and emotionally wrung out, Elias is still there waiting. "We need to talk," he says. "About Memorial Grace. About what happened here. About fixing the systems that keep failing people." Lydia nods, too tired to be cautious. "Okay, but not today. Today I need to go home and hold my daughter and remember why I keep fighting battles I never win." "You won this one," Elias says softly. Lydia thinks about Claire Warren, dying alone while administrators ignored warnings. She thinks about Harold, nearly lost to the same negligence. She thinks about every patient she couldn't save because she was silenced or fired or paid to disappear. "Did I?" she asks, and walks away before he can answer. 3 days pass in a strange suspended state where nothing feels quite real. Harold stabilizes, improves, begins eating solid food, and complaining about the hospital's terrible coffee. All signs that he's genuinely recovering. Lydia visits twice a day despite having no official right to be there, and nobody stops her. Not security, not Margaret Voss, not even the nurses who whispered about her just last week. It's as if some invisible hand has lifted the rules that bound her, though Lydia doesn't trust it. She's learned that institutional grace is always temporary, always conditional, always ready to be revoked the moment you become inconvenient again. Emma notices the change in her mother. The way Lydia stares into space during breakfast, the way she checks her phone obsessively, the way she startles at every unexpected sound. On Wednesday night, Emma sits across from her at their small kitchen table and asks the question Lydia has been dreading. "Mom, are you going back to work at the hospital?" Lydia looks at her daughter, 12 years old and too perceptive, with her father's dark eyes and Lydia's stubborn chin. "I don't know, baby. It's complicated. Mr. Hargrove needs you," Emma says simply, with the clarity that children possess before the world teaches them that need isn't enough. "Lots of people need lots of things," Lydia replies, but the words taste like ash. "That doesn't mean." Her phone rings. Harold's daughter, Grace. Lydia's hand shakes as she answers. "Lydia." Grace's voice is thin, stretched tight over panic barely contained. "Something's wrong. Dad was fine this morning, but now they're saying he's crashing. Blood pressure dropping, fever spiking. They think it's a secondary infection, but they can't find the source. Can you come? Please?" Lydia is already moving, grabbing her keys, her coat. Emma follows her to the door, fear written across her young face. "Mom, stay with Mrs. Chin next door. I'll call you as soon as I know something." Lydia kisses her daughter's forehead, trying to transfer calm she doesn't feel. "I love you." The drive to the hospital is a blur of streetlights and terror. Secondary infections after sepsis aren't uncommon, but Harold's system has already been through so much. His heart, compromised since childhood. His age, working against him. And underlying all of it, the nagging certainty that something else is wrong, something the current medical team is missing because they don't know Harold the way Lydia does. She takes the stairs again, 4 flights at a full run, her lungs burning, her legs screaming. When she bursts onto the 4th floor, she finds chaos. Harold's room is full of people, nurses, residents, Dr. Michael's barking orders while a crash cart stands ready just outside the door. And standing in the hallway, looking more shattered than Lydia has ever seen another human being look, is Elias Warren. He sees her, and something in his expression breaks. "I don't know what I'm missing," he says, and his voice carries the weight of every patient he couldn't save, every failure that haunts him. "I've reviewed his chart a dozen times, ordered every test. We're treating the sepsis, supporting his organs, but he keeps declining. It's like, he stops, swallows hard. It's like watching someone slip away and not being able to see the rope that's pulling them under. Lydia pushes past him into the room. Harold is conscious but barely, his skin ashen, his breathing rapid and shallow. Grace sits beside him, holding his hand, her lips moving in silent prayer. The monitors paint a grim picture. BP 78/45, heart rate 142, oxygen saturation 89% despite supplemental O2. Talk to me, Lydia says to the room at large. What changed? A resident she doesn't recognize looks up from the chart. Vitals were stable until approximately 1,400 hours. Then sudden onset of hypotension and respiratory distress. We started broad-spectrum antibiotics for presumed secondary infection, but there's been no response. Lydia moves to Harold's bedside, her trained hands already checking his foresights, his skin temperature, the subtle signs that tell stories charts can't capture. Harold, can you hear me? It's Lydia. His eyes flutter open. Kiddo, he whispers. Hurts. Right side. Hurts bad. Right side. Lydia's mind races through differential diagnoses. She palpates his abdomen gently. Harold gasps when she reaches his right upper quadrant. When did the pain start? This morning. Thought it was just sore. Didn't want to complain. Of course he didn't. Harold's generation doesn't complain. They endure. They suffer in silence until suffering becomes catastrophe. Lydia turns to Dr. Michaels. Has anyone done imaging of his gallbladder? Michaels blinks. Gallbladder? We've been focused on the cardiac issues and the sepsis. He has right upper quadrant pain. Fever. Hypotension. Classic Murphy's sign. Lydia's voice gains strength, certainty. I think he's developing acute cholecystitis, possibly with perforation. The infection we're treating isn't from his foresight or his heart. It's from his gallbladder. We need an ultrasound now. There's a moment of suspended disbelief. Who is this terminated nurse to walk in and diagnose what a team of doctors missed? But then Elias speaks, his voice carrying authority. Get ultrasound up here, stat. And prep for possible emergency surgical intervention. The room explodes into coordinated chaos. Lydia stays at Harold's side, monitoring his breathing, his pulse, talking to him in a low continuous stream of reassurance that's as much for her as for him. Stay with me, Harold. Stay with me. You don't get to leave yet. You promised you'd teach me how to make your wife's apple pie, remember? You can't back out of a promise. The ultrasound tech arrives within minutes. A young woman who sets up her equipment with practiced efficiency. The probe moves across Harold's abdomen, and even Lydia, who isn't trained in reading ultrasounds, can see the problem. Harold's gallbladder is distended, its walls thickened, surrounded by fluid that shouldn't be there. Acute cholecystitis with suspected perforation, the tech confirms, her voice tight. He needs surgery. Dr. Michaels is already on the phone with the surgical team. Dr. Chin, we have an emergent gallbladder. How fast can you get here? A pause. 20 minutes. We'll prep him. The next 20 minutes are the longest of Lydia's life. Harold's condition continues to deteriorate, his blood pressure requiring medication to maintain, his oxygen levels dropping despite maximal support. Grace sobs quietly in the corner, making phone calls to family members, preparing for the possibility that her father won't survive the surgery his weakened body can barely tolerate. Elias stands beside Lydia, not speaking, just present. At one point, Harold opens his eyes and looks directly at him. You're the new boss, he says, his voice barely audible. The one, Lydia yelled at. Despite everything, Elias almost smiles. That's me. Good, Harold whispers. She's usually right, when she yells. You should listen to her. I'm learning that, Elias says softly. Dr. Chin arrives looking exactly like someone pulled from dinner with her family. Hair slightly disheveled, still wearing pearl earrings with her scrubs. She assesses Harold quickly, her experienced eyes taking in details that paint a brutal picture. He's a poor surgical candidate, she says bluntly. His cardiac history, his age, his current septic state, the mortality risk is extremely high. What happens if we don't operate? Grace asks, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. The perforation will worsen. The infection will spread. He'll likely go into septic shock and die within hours. Dr. Chen's honesty is brutal but kind. Surgery gives him a chance. Not a great chance, but a chance. Grace looks at her father, then at Lydia. What should I do? The question hits Lydia like a physical blow. This isn't her decision to make. She's not family, not even officially staff. But Grace is asking because she trusts Lydia to know Harold, to understand what he would want. Lydia thinks about the conversations she's had with Harold over 6 years. About his wife, gone 12 years but still present in every story he tells. About his grandchildren who visit on Sundays. About his garden that he tends with arthritic hands because growing things gives him purpose. About his fierce, stubborn determination to live life on his terms until the very last possible moment. Harold, Lydia says gently, do you understand what's happening? The surgery is risky, but without it, I'll die, Harold finishes. His eyes are clear now, focused. Known for a while, something was coming. Body knows when it's time. He reaches for Grace's hand, squeezes with what little strength he has left. Want to try? Want to see spring? Want to teach kiddo about apple pie? Grace breaks down completely, and Lydia holds her while the surgical team prepares to take Harold to the OR. As they wheel his bed toward the elevator, Harold catches Lydia's hand. You saved me. Again. Always saving me. That's the deal, Lydia says through tears she can no longer contain. You keep fighting, I keep saving. We're a team. The elevator doors close, taking Harold to surgery, and an outcome no one can predict. Lydia stands in the empty hallway, Grace sobbing against her shoulder, and feels Elias Warren's hand on her back. Not presumptuous, not romantic, just human connection in a moment when connection is the only thing holding anyone together. I should have caught it sooner, Elias says, his voice raw with self-recrimination. I had all the information. I should have. You're not superhuman, Lydia interrupts. None of us are. We miss things. We make mistakes. The question isn't whether we're perfect. It's whether we care enough to keep trying when we fail. They wait. The surgery takes 4 hours. 4 hours of sitting in uncomfortable chairs in the surgical waiting room, drinking terrible coffee, watching the clock move with cruel slowness. Grace alternates between pacing and praying. Lydia holds her hand when she sits, releases it when she needs to move. Elias doesn't leave. He should. He has a hospital to run, responsibilities that don't include holding vigil for a patient he barely knows. But he stays, and Lydia understands it's not really about Harold. It's about Claire, about every patient lost to systems that prioritize efficiency over attention, about the weight of choices made and not made, actions taken and not taken. At 11:47 p.m., Dr. Chen emerges from the surgical suite still wearing her scrubs, her mask pulled down to reveal exhaustion and something else, something that makes Lydia's heart leap and plummet simultaneously. Dr. Sarah Chen pulls off her surgical cap, and her expression carries the particular exhaustion of a surgeon who has just fought a battle against impossible odds. Grace stands so abruptly her chair tips backward, clattering against the floor. Lydia's hand finds hers, steadying them both. He made it through surgery, Dr. Chen says, and the collective exhale in the waiting room is audible. The gallbladder was gangrenous and had perforated. We removed it and cleaned out the infection as best we could. But I won't lie to you, the next 72 hours are critical. His heart struggled during the procedure. His body has been through tremendous trauma. He's not out of the woods. But he's alive, Grace whispers, as if saying it too loud might break the spell. He's alive, Dr. Chen confirms. And he's a fighter. That counts for something. They move Harold to the ICU, where machines breathe for him and monitor every flutter of his struggling heart. Lydia isn't allowed in. ICU has strict visitor policies, and she's still technically not an employee. But she stands outside the glass partition, watching the rise and fall of his chest, counting each breath like a prayer. Elias appears beside her with 2 cups of coffee from the vending machine. They're both terrible, lukewarm and metallic tasting, but Lydia accepts hers with a grateful nod. They stand in silence for a long moment, watching Harold through the glass like he's a museum exhibit labeled "The Cost of Broken Systems." I need to show you something, Elias says finally. In my office. Will you come? Lydia wants to say no. Wants to stay here where she can see Harold, where she can witness each moment he continues to live. But something in Elias's voice, urgency mixed with dread, makes her nod. His office is exactly what she expected, neat, organized, still partially unpacked from his recent arrival. But what she doesn't expect is the pile of documents spread across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. She recognizes some of them, her own personnel files, complaint forms she filed months ago. But there are others too, documents she's never seen, stamped with legal warnings and settlement agreements. I've spent the last 3 days building a case, Elias says, closing the door behind them. Not just about you. About the systematic failures at both Memorial Grace and here at Willow Ridge. About the pattern of silencing staff who raise legitimate concerns. About the culture of prioritizing institutional reputation over patient safety. He spreads the documents out further, and Lydia sees names she recognizes. Other nurses, doctors, even a pharmacist who tried to report medication errors and was quietly let go. You weren't the only one, Elias continues. You were just the most persistent. The one who refused to stay quiet even after they paid you off. Lydia sinks into a chair, overwhelmed. Why are you doing this? Elias sits across from her, and for the first time since she met him, his carefully controlled facade cracks completely. Because my wife died from the exact negligence you tried to stop. Because I've spent 3 years believing her death was a tragic accident when it was actually preventable institutional failure. Because I've been exactly the kind of administrator who enables this culture of silence, and his voice breaks. I can't do it anymore. I can't be that person. He pulls out another document, this one with Claire Warren's name at the top. I requested the full investigation file from Memorial Grace. They fought it, threatened legal action, but I have enough standing to force disclosure. Claire's death wasn't isolated. There were 6 near-miss incidents in the 2 weeks before she was admitted. All documented by you. All dismissed by administration. Lydia takes the file with trembling hands. Reading it feels like reopening a wound she'd tried so hard to let scar over. Every detail brings back memories. The panic of discovering Claire in distress. The desperate minutes of trying to reverse damage already done. The hollow feeling when the code was called and she knew they'd lost. I tried so hard to save her, Lydia whispers. I did everything right that night. But by the time I found her, the wrong medications had been in her system for almost an hour. Her body was already shutting down. I know. Elias's voice is gentle but firm. And I know you spent weeks before that trying to prevent exactly that scenario. You documented. You reported. You escalated through proper channels. And they silenced you. They gave me money and made me sign away my voice, Lydia says, bitterness seeping through. I told myself I was doing it for Emma. That I couldn't risk losing my nursing license, couldn't risk being unemployable. But the truth is, she stops, forces herself to say it out loud for the first time. The truth is I was scared. Scared of fighting a system bigger than me. Scared of being destroyed by people with more power and better lawyers. That's not weakness, Elias says. That's survival. You had a daughter to protect. But Lydia, he leans forward, his eyes intense. You didn't stay silent. You came here and tried again. Even knowing what it cost you the first time, you saw the same problems and you fought the same fight. That's not survival. That's courage. Lydia shakes her head, tears streaming down her face now. Harold almost died because I wasn't here. Because they fired me for being inconvenient. How is that courage? How is that anything but failure? Harold is alive because you taught the staff who remained what excellent nursing looks like, Elias counters. He's alive because when his daughter called, you came anyway, despite having no job, no protection, no reason to risk yourself again. He's alive because you diagnosed what a team of doctors missed. You didn't fail, Lydia. The system failed. And he stops, swallows hard. I failed. As a director, as a physician, as someone who should have been asking harder questions about why good nurses keep getting fired for caring too much. He stands and walks to his window, looking out over the parking lot where this whole impossible connection began. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling a press conference. I'm going public with everything, the pattern of negligence at Memorial Grace, the retaliation against whistleblowers, the culture of silence that enabled my wife's death and nearly killed Harold Hargrove. I'm releasing you from your NDA. My lawyers have found enough evidence of bad faith to nullify it, and I'm resigning as director of this hospital. Lydia's head snaps up. What? No. You can't. I have to. Elias turns back to face her. I can't fix a system from inside when I've been part of the problem, but I can use whatever platform I have to shine a light on it. I can make sure your voice, and the voices of every other healthcare worker who's been silenced, gets heard. I can make my wife's death mean something. They'll destroy you, Lydia says. Memorial Grace has lawyers, money, power. They'll bury you in litigation. They'll make sure you never work in healthcare again. I know. Elias's smile is sad but genuine. Turns out I'm willing to be destroyed if it means the right thing gets said out loud. I learned that from a woman who screamed at me in a parking lot about how people like me ruin lives. She was right, and it's time I did something about it. The press conference happens at 10 a.m. in the hospital's main auditorium. Word is spread. The room is packed with staff, local media, and community members who've heard whispers of scandal. Margaret Voss sits in the back row, her face tight with barely contained fury. The hospital's legal team flanks the podium like sentries, but they can't stop what Elias has set in motion. Lydia watches from the side of the room, Grace Hargrove standing beside her in solidarity. Emma is at school, blessedly unaware that her mother's life is about to be laid bare for public consumption. Elias takes the podium with the quiet dignity of a man who has already lost everything that matters. My name is Dr. Elias Warren. 5 days ago, I became the Director of Medicine at Willow Ridge Community Hospital. Today, I'm resigning that position and speaking publicly about systematic failures in our healthcare institutions that cost lives, including my wife's. The room erupts. Cameras flash. Reporters shout questions. Elias raises a hand for silence and continues. 3 years ago, Claire Warren died at Memorial Grace Hospital from a preventable medication error. I was told it was a tragic accident. I was told that everything possible had been done. I believed those lies because believing them was easier than accepting that my wife died, because hospital administrators valued their reputation more than patient safety. He pulls out documents, holds them up for the cameras. These are formal complaints filed by nursing staff at Memorial Grace in the weeks before my wife's death. Complaints about medication protocols being bypassed, about dangerous staffing levels, about equipment failures being ignored. Every single complaint was dismissed. Every single nurse who filed them was either silenced through NDAs or terminated. His eyes find Lydia across the room. One nurse in particular tried to warn them. Documented near misses. Escalated through proper channels. And when my wife was admitted, this nurse worked a shift that overlapped with the medication error. She discovered the mistake, called for help, performed CPR. She tried to save Claire. And for her trouble, she was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement and leave her job. Murmurs ripple through the audience. Lydia feels every eye turning toward her, feels the weight of exposure she spent 3 years avoiding. That nurse came to work here at Willow Ridge, Elias continues. She saw the same problems, understaffing, protocol violations, system failures. She reported them through proper channels. And she was fired for it. 3 days ago, a patient nearly died from the exact type of oversight she'd been trying to prevent. He survived only because she came back, despite having no job, no obligation, no reason to risk herself, and diagnosed what our medical team missed. The room is completely silent now. Elias's voice drops, becomes intimate despite the audience. I'm not here to blame individual staff members. Most of us enter healthcare wanting to help people, but we've built systems that punish excellence and reward silence. Systems that treat whistleblowers as problems instead of solutions. Systems that value institutional reputation over the fundamental mission to do no harm. He pauses, his hands gripping the podium. I was part of that system. I enabled it through my own silence, my own comfort with the status quo. I can't change the past. I can't bring my wife back. But I can make sure her death, and the near death of Harold Hargrove, means something. I can use whatever influence I have to demand better. To demand that healthcare workers who speak up are protected, not punished. To demand that patient safety comes before institutional convenience. He looks directly at the hospital's legal team. I am formally releasing Lydia Monroe from any and all non-disclosure agreements signed under duress at Memorial Grace Hospital. I am calling for a full independent investigation of both institutions. And I am donating my entire settlement from Claire's death to establishing a legal defense fund for healthcare workers who face retaliation for reporting safety concerns. The room explodes again, this time with applause mixed with shouted questions and the clicking of camera shutters. Elias steps away from the podium and walks directly to Lydia. In front of everyone, he extends his hand. "Thank you," he says simply, "for trying to save her, for not giving up even when it cost you everything, for being the kind of nurse the world needs more of." Lydia takes his hand, and in that moment, something fundamental shifts. This isn't redemption. Redemption is too clean a word for the messy reality of human failure and growth. But it's acknowledgement. It's the truth, spoken out loud, refusing to be buried anymore. 3 days later, Harold wakes up in the ICU. His first words are, "Did I miss anything important?" Grace laughs through tears and tells him everything. When she finishes, Harold asks for Lydia. When she arrives, he hands her a folded piece of paper, his handwriting shaky but determined. Wrote this before surgery, just in case. Lydia unfolds it with trembling hands. The letter is short. Dear kiddo, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. But I need you to know something. You didn't fail me. You never failed me. You gave me 6 more years than I deserved. 6 years of feeling seen, cared for, valued. You fought for me when no one else would. You stood in the gap even when it cost you everything. That's not failure. That's love in its purest form. Don't you dare doubt your worth. Don't you dare let them make you small. The world needs nurses who care too much, who fight too hard, who refuse to accept that death and suffering are inevitable. Promise me you'll keep fighting. Promise me you'll keep being exactly who you are. Your friend always, Harold. Lydia reads it through tears that won't stop falling. Outside the window, snow begins to fall on Willow Ridge, covering the town in white that feels like both ending and beginning. Elias's press conference has sparked investigations, lawsuits, and a national conversation about healthcare worker retaliation. Margaret Voss has been placed on administrative leave. The hospital board is in chaos. But in this room, none of that matters. What matters is that Harold is alive, squeezing Lydia's hand with strength that's returning day by day. What matters is that truth has been spoken, even at tremendous cost. What matters is that sometimes, just sometimes, the people who care too much win. I promise, Lydia whispers to Harold. I promise I'll keep fighting. And as the snow falls and the world turns and broken systems begin their long, painful process of repair, Lydia Monroe allows herself something she hasn't felt in 3 years. Hope that maybe, just maybe, the fight is worth it. The end. Sometimes the battles we fight in silence are the ones that matter most. Lydia Monroe lost everything for refusing to look away when systems failed and lives hung in the balance. She was punished for caring too deeply, for speaking too loudly, for standing in the gap when it would have been easier to simply turn away. And in that parking lot confrontation, raw, desperate, and utterly human, she unknowingly set in motion a reckoning that would expose years of institutional corruption and save countless lives. But here's the question that should haunt us all. How many times do we stay silent when we see something wrong? How many Harold Hargroves suffer because good people choose comfort over courage? Would you have signed that non-disclosure agreement to protect your family, or would you have kept fighting knowing it might cost you everything? Elias Warren spent 3 years believing a lie because the truth was too painful to face. It took a stranger's fury in a cold parking lot to shatter his carefully constructed denial and force him to see that his wife's death wasn't fate, it was failure. His redemption didn't come from grand gestures, but from the humbling work of admitting he'd been part of the problem and choosing to become part of the solution, regardless of the cost. The courage to change isn't found in perfection. It's found in the willingness to look at our own complicity and say never again. So ask yourself, when the comfortable lie protects you and the difficult truth demands everything, which path would you choose? If this story moved you, if it made you think about the invisible heroes fighting for us in hospitals, schools, and every corner of society where truth is inconvenient and courage is costly, then share it. Let it be a reminder that sometimes the person who seems broken is actually the bravest one in the room. Follow our channel for more stories that challenge, inspire, and refuse to let important truths stay buried. Leave a like, drop a comment about what this story meant to you, and remember, the world changes when ordinary people decide that silence is no longer an option.